to be perfectly honest, the boneless ones really tried to shy away from any political. We were kids that grew up in the East Bay, man. We had the politics jammed down our throats as kids. People literally standing on soapboxes on there and yelling at each other from one corner to another. It was one of the things we tried to shy away from and try to keep it light and make it fun.
What's up, everybody? Keefy of GhostCultMag.com here with you again, and we welcome in the great Max of the Boneless Ones. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing great, man. Great to see you.
It is so great to see you. I have had so much fun seeing all the guys around the Bay Area the last few years. Going way back, I was a huge Skate for the Devil fan.
Right.
So pumped about the recent album, shows, all the things. I wore that hat all over the Bay for like a straight year. And everywhere I went, people were like, dude. I was like,
I remember
dude.
those Skate for the Devil. I know those guys, you know.
Yeah, well, they think it's like a fashion brand, but like real ones know. And so, so many good things. You guys have a festival in Europe coming up. I hope more shows. I hope more music.
Yeah,
all the things. But how are you doing? How's everything?
I'm doing good. I live up in the Grass Valley, Nevada County area. It's kind of natural progression getting out of the Bay Area. For me, at least, it was. I'm born and raised. So I've been up here for about 15 years. I have a warehouse. I have a merchandising marketing company, which is what I've done for years and years and years. It's based out of Sacramento now. I share a warehouse with Legend Skateboards. So the whole warehouse is production facility. We actually are still making things. We have screen printing. We have digital output stuff like dye sublimation and doing all the trucker hats, as you that you just mentioned, pretty popular item. And then in the back is a whole wood shop, wood press. In between it is a big huge half pipe. Basically, I've died and gone. I shouldn't say I've died and gone to heaven because I'm getting old, but it's a dream setup for me. So that's kind of what I'm doing up here. We still have our studio. We are now sharing the studio with Forbidden, of course, because that's Craig and Chris, who are two of the core members of the new Boneless Ones. And so we still have a studio in Oakland. I'm down there all the time. I was down there yesterday for Forbidden, and it was 109 when I was leaving here, and I was in the fog at 6 o'clock in Point Richmond going, I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home. I don't want to go home. But that's kind of my scene as I bounce back and forth from we call this area the foothills, down to the Bay Area. My mother still lives in Berkeley, right around the corner from where Ruthie's Inn was back in the day. So I have roots in both places. That's kind of what I'm doing, bouncing back and forth.
Nice work. So much to unpack there. You and I can nerd out about marketing stuff. My day job is in digital marketing and social media. And I've done years of music marketing, not only for my own bands, but other bands and labels. So it's a lot of fun. Yeah, I got all the FOMO. I heard about the Secret Forbidden show in Richmond as we record this today. That was last night. And I was like, oh, I'm dying, but I'm going to be patient. I'm going to be really patient and wait till later in the year. I'm sure some videos are going to leak out. But yeah, I'm so stoked for them.
I can pretty much promise you that's going to happen.
I'm so proud of them as a major Forbidden fan. To an annoying level of all my friends, that Forbidden was like, for me as a non-Bay Area native, that was one of my favorite, obviously the big ones, but like that was one of my bands that made it over to the East Coast, and I was obsessed with them for a long time.
Well, and this is weird because I think a lot of people know I'm much more, my roots are much more in punk rock, and it's kind of how we grew up. This is before the metal movement. I grew up in Berkeley, California. And big, huge metal. Berkeley is known because of Ruthie's Inn, and a number of the bands that have come from Berkeley, Testament and Exodus and Lost Rocket. The bands go on and on and on. Berkeley before that was much, or at the onset of it was a big, huge punk rock town. Because we had a couple of different clubs, and there were a number of bands going around too. But keep in mind, as kids, we were all, and I mean Skolnick and Rick Hunold, which Rick says hello. I just talked to him about an hour ago. We all rode skateboards as kids in the mid 70s to late 70s in California. It was the sidewalk surfer, and it is just what we did. None of us knew that in our little clique of little kids, and we all went to the same high schools and stuff, who was going to go in what direction. Like Rick played piano when he was a little kid, and basically just picked up the guitar and was a virtuoso. There is a little secret to that, and that's that. What's his name was our guitar teacher? He was the guitar teacher. Ride the Ride the Alien, Surf the Alien.
Satriani.
Yeah, Satriani. Well, thank you. I see. I
Joe
look like
Satriani.
I
Yeah.
said you look like such an asshole. But I just didn't remember his name. Joe Satriani was a guitar teacher. His guitar shop, he had a shop, and he taught out of it, was 2 blocks from our junior high school. So, I mean, Satriani was the guitar teacher of our first guitarist, Rick Hunold, Kirk Hammett, on and on and on. Gary Holt. This is just the guitar teacher in town. People say, wow, what was in the water in Berkeley? Well, Joe Satriani was a guitar teacher. Like, how come there's all these guitar virtuosos? So that was kind of interesting growing up. So we definitely had a couple different ways that people were going. There's some pretty famous punk rock bands. My brother was the first drummer in Fang. So he's the drummer on that Landshark album that they just celebrated the 40th anniversary of that. So my background is just a little more punk rock, but you have to realize the clubs, this term crossover that's become pretty repopularized in the past, 5 or 10 years. You didn't hear that. You didn't hear the term crossover for about 15 years. There was no, we're doing crossover, That was a big thing out of the East Bay. And I can't say it was just the East Bay because you're East Coast. Okay. There were 2 different things kind of simultaneously happening on the both coasts, I think, personally. You've had some grimy metal that was kind of very rooted in punk rock on the East Coast, and the same thing was happening here. Just kind of interesting. It's just kind of how it all started. Very organic, very organic,
Indeed, and also you can't ignore LA also had an impact on skaters and Z-Boys and Suicidal and all
I was
them.
just going to say Suicidal. Talk about the crossover. I don't want to say crossover kings, but definitely one of the best at it. You know what I mean? And always have been. Always. And see, they would come up and do those shows. I'm going to try not to say the term Ruthie's in too many times, but they would come up and do these shows. So that was this one promoter, Wes Robinson, and he was very roots. So he knew everybody. It wasn't particularly that he was a big, huge promoter. He didn't have his fingers in things like that. He knew everybody because he was roots. He was from the East Bay. So it wasn't particularly that strange that it would be Boneless One's Death Angel, Testament on a bill, or Violent Coercion, these punk rock bands intermixed with these heavy metal bands. It was just where we were from. You know what I mean? So it was happening in LA too. It was happening. Oh, sure, you have No Mercy, you get Suicidal, and then you have the much more punk rock bands like Circle Jerks and Black Flag coming out at the same time.
Right on. And I just want to jump in and also say, again, East Bay punk was definitely a draw. The history and legacy of that is still very vibrant here. Gilman Street is still there somehow, still doing the DIY thing, fan run, basically fan supported, still a DIY organization. There's still some legend bands hanging around, even at the bigger levels. They still know their roots. I'm a humongous Jawbreaker fan. I actually saw them for the first time in New York back in the day.
Yeah,
but they did a huge stint out here.
Well, and Offspring, which you go, Offspring, whatever, dude.
Green Day.
You look at every other Saturday night at Gilman back in 86, 87 was the Offspring. And you're like, same Offspring? You're like, yeah, same fucking Offspring. You know?
There's a tremendous book while those guys were going to school at like Berkeley, at Cal Berkeley, for like in Stanford. But there's a tremendous book about Punk USA, about Lookout Records, which was very, hugely influential in the scene. And, obviously, you also have Fat Wreck and Fat Mike and things like that, who we interviewed not too long ago. It's actually like gone like bananas viral for our YouTube.
I'll bet.
And he, of course, gave me shit about my Anthrax patch on my vest behind me and all that. It's cool. Like we were cool about it. And then I do want to shout out the Punk Rock Museum that Fat Mike just opened.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
As a whole East Bay section. So there are sections: London, Los Angeles, New York City, DC, Chicago, everywhere else in the world, Japan.
I've seen a ton of verbal abuse stuff.
Verbal abuse
in the East Bay section.
Yeah, so much East Bay punk. And it's really I have to say, as a fan, just beautifully done. I have to like really gather my thoughts and all my photos and put together a righteous review of that place. But I recommend it for everyone. I know people are cynical, Vegas and all that shit, but like, there was supposed to be a CBGB's museum that never happened. This is going to be, like, for me, the closest thing. I was really happy about it.
Wasn't it going to be next door?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. And now you fly through JFK or whatever, and there's a CBGB's kiosk or something where it's like the CBGB's cafe in the fucking airport, and you're like,
Right. Yeah. Let
what
me
the fuck?
let me ask you a question because I think you're uniquely experienced to talk about this. When I grew up in New York City, there was definitely early on a very big division between punks and metalheads, and I was definitely more punk. I had a lot of friends. I was more
Oh
metal
yeah.
than punk. I wasn't a punk. I was a metalhead, and I would go to matinees with my friends, and they'd be like, "Dude, do not let anyone see you with that Metallica shirt and your long hair. You're gonna get beat.
Oh
You're
yeah.
gonna get beat up." I don't know if that existed out here in the Bay Area or other cities, but you tell me if that was also your experience. I
Well, it
feel like
definitely
there's a
did. It definitely did in the beginning. Like
yeah,
I mentioned the Black Flag. I mean, the early Black Flag shows were ridiculously violent. And I mean, people just getting headbutted into the wall and fucking stuff that you go, you didn't really need to do that to that guy, and you definitely didn't the whole germs, Darby Crash, fucking safety pin and fucking beat up, dudes nodding out. You didn't back in that scene when it was gritty, no, the two crowds did not mix. And I don't know what club really broke to us. It were the clubs that kind of broke it down because they would pull from both genres. You know what I mean? Because both genres were becoming vital. But no, there were points, and I can't say the metalers kind of fucked. Metalers and some of the metalers came from better families than the punk rockers, so we got kind of screwed with just on the basis of our where we lived in town, like what side of and I'm dead serious, what side of the tracks we lived on. You know what I mean? But that wasn't prevalent. I don't want to say anything like that. But there are two different factions, that's for sure. Those dudes would pull up in Camaros and we'd skate halfway across town on our skateboards to get to the shows. It's pretty obvious when you're hanging out in the parking lot and one dude's got a skateboard, one dude's blasting fucking ACDC out of his, truck or whatever. But anyway, sure, there was that division. Sure. Early
fair
on,
enough. Yeah, like within a year, it was like for me because I came around like mid '80s. For me, it was over quickly. Like within a year and a half, then it was like, okay, we're cool with each other, and everybody's wearing everybody's shirts and going to everybody else's shows, and it was safer. I don't want to say it was safe. It was
think of
safer.
it the stage before that when it was um it's kind of the punk that I was just talking about. A lot of like Sid Vicious, kind of old school torn t-shirts. And I'm talking 80 here. You know what I mean? And the only metal that was going around was a new wave of British heavy metal. It was fucking Maiden and stuff. And you're talking and it hadn't, I mean, I know that had hit out in the Bay Area because you hear Harold and fucking Ron Quintana. And I mean, you hear the stories of where it was hitting. And our manager, Tim Healy, worked at the record vault too. But the division was so different back then. You just didn't see it the form of heavy metal that's going now, thrash metal didn't exist at the beginning. That wasn't thrash metal. That was more melodic British heavy metal, if you ask me. Accept and I don't know where Accept's from, but that kind of Iron Maiden and that kind of wave of metal to me. Two totally different things at that point. Punk and metal, two totally different directions, if you ask me. So
Right on. And then obviously you had the luck of growing up here, the good fortune to be around so much talent and so many bands. But for
yeah.
you as before the Boneless ones, before you were in bands, before you went to shows, how did you acquire new music? Was there zines? Was it tape trading?
This is way before tape trading did. Or if in my world, I mean, tape trading, I suppose that term could be applied to taping the first Thrasher Skate Rock 1 tape from my sister. Maybe that equates my older sister. You know what I mean? But I mean, to be perfectly honest, the punk rock that was available when I was kind of starting out and late 70s, early 80s were like 7 records. It was God Save the Queen. It was Dead Boys, Young, Loud, and Snotty. It was stuff like Blondie and I mean, dude, even Devo back then. You know what I mean? This is before there was substantial punk rock. Now, there was stuff coming out of LA, like you got the Germs record and the Adolescents, the Circle record and stuff. That shit was breakthrough. When we got or when you heard the Riding on the Rock with Agent Orange and stuff, that was breakthrough. How do we get new music store, record stores? And Berkeley, especially back then, had Telegraph Avenue. I mean, known for their fucking record stores. There were about 5 of them in a row. I mean, there was Universal Records. It was nothing but punk rock records. So No, you went and bought records, to be perfectly honest. I mean, somebody would get it and you'd hear it somewhere and you go and buy it. It was life changing. Every record came out, you're like, oh my God, because it would progress that much more, you know.
And when did you become aware of more East Coast punk bands, whether it was New York or DC or somewhere else?
The other guy I was going to throw in there was Joe Jackson, because he was really, this is 80, like 80, 82. That first record, Joe Jackson record, or whatever it was killer. The one that Anthrax covered, you know what I mean? How did we discover East Coast? Well, Dead Boys, Young, Loud, and Stony, were Ramones. I mean, that's one of the records I left out of there. Whatever it is, Rocket Thrash or whatever the first. I went and saw the Ramones on the Rock and Roll High School tour, 78, I think, and they showed the movie beforehand. This was in Oakland. They showed the movie beforehand and the Ramones played. So, I mean, give you an idea, I was listening to the Ramones in 78, you know.
Amazing. Yeah, me too. I have a huge, you can't see
well,
it.
you must have been. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah. But also like,
listen, I know you're interviewing me, but tell me, what was your first punk band
it was Ramones. And then Ramones were, I don't know if it was just local to New York. We had a classic rock station that I had an older brother that listened to 24/7, and it was everything progressive rock, what we now call classic
different
rock.
times at 11 o'clock would be.
Yeah, but they definitely considered Ramones and Clash and Sex Pistols on the class, like right next to Zeppelin and Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So like to me and Rush, and they were all the same to me until I got into metal later on. To me, punk was just another rock, another version of rock music. And I love the Ramones. You can't tell I have a huge Ramones flag right over my shoulder that's off camera, right in front of like the infamous first Ramones album cover shot in front of CB.
The circle. Yeah.
So like I love Ramones. I'm very interested to see if that Ramones movie ever gets made with Pete Davidson.
I would love it. Sounds like one thing me and you have actually in similarity is an older sibling that was into it and listened to music. And I have two older siblings. So I did grow up with a radio playing in my house. A little different of radio, but we were in Berkeley, so we had a college rock station called KALX, and they played all kinds of crazy. I mean, that's probably one of the things that really introduced us to the different genres of music was the radio station. I was going to tell you. So as a kid, right? So I was listening to music in 74, 75, 76, because I'm a little older, and my favorite band was The Who as a kid. Beach Boys and The Who, which sounds fucking crazy, but those were my favorite bands. The Clash came along. The Clash were life-changing for me. I ended up seeing The Clash 5 times. And some of the most incredible shows, talk about energetic and I mean, giving it all. It was, whoever did, dude, I saw the Clash open. It was the Pretenders, the Clash, and the Who at Oakland Stadium. I mean, it was just ridiculous. And I saw them at the Berkeley Civic Center, which was the little community theater on our high school. So the Clash were pretty breakthrough for me. Still to this day, Clash are so ahead of their time. You know what I mean? So that was a big
those records hold up equal to anything. I love those first few Clash records. They're unbelievable.
The Green record?
Oh, yeah, dude. And of course, London Calling. If I played bass. If you
London Calling's
later,
a different album.
Yeah, later on. But yeah, like
the Green album. I mean, that's different. They had expanded to London Calling, got it, went double album. What the hell? You know what I mean? Stuff like Lost in the Supermarket. I mean, think of how much different that is than the first couple albums. I mean, it's much different.
True.
Progress. Yeah.
Definitely true. So let's fast forward a little to 86. You don't know that Skate for the Devil is going to go around the world, but it does, right? It does go around the world. I definitely had people in my high school in the late 80s who had tapes with the songs on it. It was like, here's a mixtape of Suicidal DRI and Boneless ones.
Yeah, skate rock stuff.
Well, I mean, like it was a huge scene, and like, again, New York City with a lot of skateboarding and all over the city. And I definitely got injured trying to skate badly and was like, no, I'm gonna do other sports or not and play guitar.
Did you skate the New York banks?
Not really, no, not well enough. Right. not competently.
So if we have time, I'm going to give you hopefully a condensed version of Skate for the Devil as an album, if that's okay.
Yeah, please. Let's
history of the
open.
And stuff.
I want to promote the festival. I want to promote the recent album.
This won't take long. well, you could take it the whole thing. Larry, you mentioned Lookout Records, Larry Livermore. So that album was originally released on a record label called Boner Records. That was first Fang, Boneless Ones, then Special Forces, Verbal Abuse, Tales of Terror, and we did a couple compilation records and a bunch of different stuff. So we were early on the roster. I think we were the second record on that the label was going to put out, and the whole skate for the devil thing was like you were mentioning high school and skateboarding and stuff. That whole term skate for the devil was just like a little buzzword around Berkeley High about the Boneless Ones. Skate for the devil, skate for the devil, because it sounds kind of cool. People were into it. It was Boneless Ones were a sticker before we were a band, which is a funny thing to hear, but it's the truth. And Troy made them in his art class when he was like 17 years old. Tom Flynn, who's the owner of Boner Records, and he just came out and did those reunion shows with Fang. We did one of them up in Sacramento. And so Tom Flynn's the owner of the Boner Records. For our album, he chose a engineer named Kevin Army in a corner of Oakland. Now, that name might ring a bell, right? Because I'm mentioning Lookout Records. It's kind of giving it away here. This was early on. So we recorded Escape from the Devil in 85, came out in 86. Kevin Army, the next album he did was Mr. T Experience. The next album he did was Op IV. And then 2 albums later, he did Green Days. So it's interesting to think. And then he did one of the major Green Day albums, Kevin Army did. So it's interesting if you think about Skate for the Devil and you think about, I mean, it's kind of, one hand for me, because the music styles are so much different, I kind of makes me scratch my head. But if you think about the lineage of Berkeley punk rock, it's actually pretty much just in a row. But when you hear that the same guy that did Green Day's major albums did Skate for the Devil, you go, whoa, let me listen to that one more time, So it's kind of interesting. It's kind of cool. Kind of cool.
And then just out of curiosity, I know you were talking about what side of the tracks you were from, but I always think of Berkeley as kind of a seat of, political intelligence and reaction and, activism and things like that, being reactionary. And as much as a fun band and a fun loving band as the Boneless Ones is, did any, obviously there's also kind of like a snotty fist in the air, middle finger thing with the band also with the vibe. And I wondered if some of that is just naturally
the snotty thing. The snotty thing was making fun of the heavy metal kids. That's what it was all about, right? And to be perfectly honest, the Boneless Ones really tried to shy away from any political. We were kids that grew up in the East Bay, man. We had the politics jammed down our throats as kids. People literally standing on soapboxes on there and yelling at each other from one corner to another. It was one of the things we tried to shy away from and try to keep it light and make it fun. So the thing about Berkeley is it's specific. East Bay, sure, very politically. Those are the students, right? Those were the people that came to town and were going to school and studying politics and doing all that stuff. Berkeley basically is divided into 3 different parts. One part are where the students live up on Frat Row. One part are where the teachers and the professors live, which is North Side. And then down below, underneath, is where all the people that worked at the college and actually had real jobs were. So there was super divisional lines where you cross the street and go, I know all the houses look different over here. Like everything seems a little more run down. And you know what? It's all changed now. Now Berkeley is tech world, and there is no bad part of town in Berkeley anymore. But so political, yes, almost anti-political to try to stay away from it. Not ignoring it because of especially what's going on in the mid 80s, but just not really jamming it down our fans' throats. The people who listen to us.
I shit you not, before I bought this, or I should say, before I rented this apartment here in San Francisco, I looked at a place in Berkeley down by the Amtrak that definitely reeked of dead bodies.
Oh shit!
So I don't know. It's literally heading down toward the Amtrak station. I know there's a bunch of condos over there, but there's also
University and
yep, way down University by the overpass. I was like, all right. I like the price. The price is nice. The apartment was all brand new, but like they couldn't get the smell of whoever died there out. I was like, I can't live.
Yeah,
I can't take this.
That's got to happen everywhere, though.
I'm sure it happens.
That's got to happen in New York.
I mean, probably all the time. We've all lived in a place where someone died. But
you think, man, in a town as old as New York, somebody's died in heaven.
For sure. So you know, obviously that life gets in the way, bands break up and disband, and then the band comes back together in a fantastic way. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure there was probably grown up stuff that got in the way of putting the band back, but like to get this record in my hands
Yeah.
is unbelievable to me that I have this. And you guys did such an incredible job. And then the live shows have been incredible, as I said, off air also. So just talk a bit about like, putting the band back with Chris and Craig.
We got an offer to play the Hate Street Fair, which is kind of a big event. It's always been a big event. It petered off, obviously, because they didn't have it for a couple of years during Corona. We got offered to play Hate Street Fair 2019, the big stage. I should say I got offered to do it through a friend of mine who's since passed away, Eddie Jennings. And I told Chris, I've stayed in touch with Chris. We kind of reconnected maybe 10 years ago. And I said, Chris, man, we got an offer. So we reached out to so Chris came in the band right at the end of the band. Chris played only 2 shows, I think, in 87. But as far as drummers go, Chris was the last drummer. He's a friend. We stayed in touch. So I am, at that point, was more in touch with Chris than I was with Troy. We reached out to Troy, said that would be incredible. We found a guitarist. We did the gig. We actually went through a couple of guitarists that weren't really matching our skill set at that point. And it's not trying to be weird, but we had progressed. If not, Chris had obviously progressed. Chris was about to get back in Machine Head again for the second or third time. Me and Troy, I have played in bands. Troy is still very involved in music, and even our bass player is in film. He's an ace editor. He does editing for movies and television. So although he was not completely hands-on, he's been involved in the music industry by editing and doing different stuff the whole time. So when we got back together, we were looking for a good guitarist. We couldn't fucking find him. We actually cycled through 2 guitars, doing shows the whole time. We get done with the show and go, oh my God. And Chris said, I know a guy. I played in this band, Spiral Arms. And there's this guy, Craig Cicero. And me and Troy are all, great name, man. How good is he? Hey, Chris went, okay. Craig's really, really good. Craig came in. Obviously, Craig's an ace. Craig's incredible guitarist, one of the best in the business. We hunkered down. So 2019, right? So Corona starts very soon after that. We built a whole studio at Chris's house, built computer stuff, mics, cords, this, that. We built a quiet room at Chris's house where we were recording and practicing and writing, pre-recording, writing that album you had in your hand. We actually sat in there for months. Went back to the studio, back to the studio, back to the studio being Chris's house. Because we were in quarantine and we weren't around anybody, but we knew that if we were COVID-free, we could all be together in the room, if that makes sense, right? We all quarantined by ourselves so that we could go play music and stuff. So that was one of the reasons. Put the album together, went into the room that we have. We have a room at the Oakland Music Complex. I think I mentioned that we split with Forbidden, and ran through them loud, hot, and then those guys got Zach Oren. So Rob Flynn has kind of a front of a warehouse, like kind of a complex, the Machine Head kind of complex, you call it, because there's some different offices and a recording studio. So we went in and we used that studio, I call it Rob's studio. It's called Shark Bite, I believe, and used this guy Zach Oren, whose nickname is the Wizard. I went over, you into Dungeons and Dragons much? He goes, yeah, I am. I went, oh, go figure. I'm sorry, that's a little snarky. Zach was really great. Had an engineer down in Texas, Matt Weiniger, who's won a Grammy in just the past few years. But Matt Weiniger is the original producer for Primus. So all those early Primus records were all produced by Matt Weiniger. So Craig worked with Matt Weiniger, went back and forth. Craig pretty much produced all this. Wasn't particularly executive producer, but he musically produced absolutely everything. I worked with Matt Weininger for weeks, going back and forth, weeks, going back and forth. Oh, we need a little more treble, a little more bass. We got the record, we got the test pressing in from Europe, from the presser, and Craig went, no, the treble's wrong and the bass is off, it's too bassy and all this stuff. And I'm not making fun of Craig. Craig was like, Craig rejected it, which is a trip to do that. So they had to go back and redo a test pressing, came back and it turned out okay. And then we went and have the records. It was a little bit of a process to do it all with COVID. I got to tell you, because we couldn't really go into, we were hiding out. We were shuttling around with masks to go do it. But we did it. We did all that during COVID so that by the time COVID was shutting down, the album came out. We put it out ourselves. That's our record label, Lightning, Thunder and Lightning Records. And I'll tell you, it's about stage presence. Thunder is the music and Lightning is the lighting. So it's about rock and roll.
And now we know. All right. And now, so we bring it to 2023. The band has been back, plays some shows. Dynamo Festival. Dynamo Festival is one of the most famous festivals in the world. Ghost Cult was actually founded in the Netherlands. So we've covered it. Not this year, but we have covered it in the past. And the lineup is insane. I'm just going to read off some of the bands for the folks watching at home here. Megadeth, In Flames, Trivium, Killswitch Engage, Biohazard. It's only like their 4th or 5th show back. Sepultura, Obituary, Prong, one of my favorites. Gatecreeper, Warbringer, Unto Others, Brand of Sacrifice, Frozen Soul, You Guys, Cobra the Impaler, Fuming Mouth, killer band, and so many more. And that's just, I mean, that's insane that you guys are going over there and playing on that bill.
That band Drain's playing too.
Drain is killer. The hardcore.
I just saw that video and was like, oh, dude, we're playing with those guys.
And so punchy.
The whole crowd, no, the whole club. It looks like it's being turned around. I'm like, what the fuck is going on there? Yeah, that's exciting. And because of my friendship with Rick and Exodus and all of our group friendship, Paul Bailoff's a good friend of mine, and so for me, the reference, I know, I think of Paul Bailoff, I think of the 2 Exodus appearances. I go, dude, I'm playing that. Like, whoa, and I'll tell you, the interesting is 2 nights before in Brussels, we play a warm-up show with the punk rock bands Fang and Stella 13 in Brussels, or it's actually outside of Brussels, and I can't pronounce the name, so it's Brussels and Brussels-like. And then 2 days later playing that, and we play right before Sepultura. If you look at the lineup, we're like in the evening, and it goes Boneless, one Sepultura, and I was like, oh God. It's the first year they're gonna have 2 stages, so you'll just turn and run. I don't know.
Basically, that's the best possible scenario for a festival setup, not one end or the other. That's too much for us old guys to run back and forth, or at least for me. And but yeah, it's so killer. I'm so proud of you guys, and I think
you, man.
You guys are gonna kill it, and it's gonna go. I know you guys are gonna go over well. Just the history of that place. I always think of Another Lesson in Violence, and Paul. Forget about the songs. Paul's in between song banter.
Yeah.
When I go home, I don't go to sleep. I just die. Like, the best ever. Like, you can't even touch it. And then he was so great when he came back into the band. And, I appreciate that time so much. I'm so glad we had that chance for Exodus to come back with Paul one more time, at least. And, man, you guys are just carrying that flag. What's next? Are you guys working on any new music? I know Forbidden is ramping back up, so that's hard, but
and more power to them. They're knocking shit out one after another. I mean, the gig yesterday was phenomenal. I know they're working on new music. That's got to be a tough task, getting warmed up for the festival and trying to write music. But they are. I know that they're scheduling to go into the studio next year at some point. I don't know what the dates are on that or anything. I've heard word, just like you have. We are working on we've got one song kind of in the can that we've just been playing around with, which sounds 2 different things. We pretty much got it finished off, but it's something we've been writing on the side. There's another song that's kind of in the works to record a couple more songs, maybe do a dual digital drop next year sometime. When we get back, our first gig back is at the Baltic Kiss, which is Chris's club over in Point Richmond. That's where the Forbidden show was yesterday. So our homecoming show is going to be at the Baltic Kiss. And then the next day we play Hate Street Fair after 19, 20, 4 years later, it comes full circle and we go back to the Hate Street Fair.
Do you have the date on that? Is that in September, October?
Those are both in late September.
Okay, I
Maybe the
should be
2nd.
back from my sojourn. I'm going on a trip, but I should be back by then. So
Fantastic.
as long as it's not the same night as the 49ers Giants game, I'm good. And probably not. And
Well, I can tell you one thing. If it was the same night as the 49ers Giants game, I would know, because Craig sister was an enormous 49ers fan.
right, huge.
We probably wouldn't be doing
should
the
talk
game
some
the
shit to
same
him if I
night.
see
The
him
same
again.
night. In fact, we blocked out many dates for 49ers because these guys bleed red and gold. So
the dreaded but also great 49ers. More all respect. I see you got your Raiders hat on, so I don't know where you're feeling is that these days about that team.
This is a skate shop. But it is a ripoff on a Raiders.
Yeah, it looks like the Raiders font.
Yeah, it's a skate shop in San Monica. It's one that's that whole Dogtown thing.
If people want to hire you and print some merch with you, where can we find you? Make sure you send me some links. But if you want to promote your thing before we sign off, let me know what we can do to help promote.
Well, I super appreciate that. For one, I'm pretty easy to find on both Instagram and Facebook. Max Fox Boneless Ones, or the Boneless Ones. I would DM me there. I'll send you some info as far as an email that I can be reached out to. But these days it's pretty much DM. I mean, I'm getting business all over the place where people just reach out to me and ask me that way. We do a bunch of different stuff. Like I said, I don't know if I mentioned it, but I think I did. I'm pressing skateboards, I'm making t-shirts, I'm doing all the digital stuff as far as dye sublimation, all the coffee mugs with the faces, right? All that's your boy here. And the trucker hats and a bunch of different stuff. But if anybody's got a merch need, reach out to me. I'm pretty humble about it. If I can't do it, I'll tell you up front. I'm pretty flexible with the pricing, and I usually deliver. I usually go to your gig and go, dude, what's going on? Here's your stuff. Wow. So yeah, I'll get you some more info. But I appreciate that.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Anything we can do to support and help. And again, thank you so much for bringing this band back. I am just tickled to be able to say I'm definitely going to see you guys again soon. Thanks so much for hanging out with Ghost Cult, Max. I really appreciate you. I appreciate seeing you around town, seeing all the fans supporting the band is really gratifying to me as an older head. And again, thanks so much for today. I
appreciate you. I appreciate Ghost Cult. I appreciate what you guys are doing promoting the scene on your end. So thank you very much.